not excessive. And Lord, your word in Thessalonians says that we're to pray without ceasing. And the world we live in, with just around every corner, there's a new crisis, a new pandemic, a new loss of a loved one. And we find ourselves thinking, yes, we do need to pray without ceasing. But the other part of that scripture says that we should give thanks in all things. And that's sometimes hard to do because we have way more requests than what we have thanks sometimes. But Lord, we need to follow your word. We need to listen to your advice. We need to follow your wisdom. So for these commissioners today, as they conduct the business of this county and they plan the future development of this county, we pray you whisper in their ear, give them the wisdom to make the decisions that benefit all the taxpayers. And we trust you, and we continue to pray without ceasing for them, this great town and community, state, and national government. And we trust you, for it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Good morning, everyone.
Commissioner Chang.
Here.
Commissioner Castleton.
Here.
Commissioner Russo. Here. Commissioner Lawbach.
Here.
Judge Hill.
Here. So we have any citizens to be heard? Okay, well, we do have quite an honor today. Recognition presentation, Proclamation R12 2021, the Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service 4-H Youth Development Program, designating October 3rd through the 9th, 2021 as National 4-H Week.
Okay.
Proclamation Week.
Proclamation 12, 2021. Whereas Aransas County is proud to honor the 4-H Youth Development Program of the Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service for 114 years of providing experience-based education to youngsters throughout the Lone Star State. And whereas this admirable program, which seeks to provide a learning experience for the whole child, including head, heart, hands, and health, helps young Texans to acquire knowledge, develop life skills, and form attitudes to enable them to become self-directed, productive, and contributing members of our society. And whereas more than 550,000 urban, suburban, and rural youth participants, ranging in age from 8 to 19, hail from diverse ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds and truly represent a cross-section of the state. And whereas the program undoubtedly could not have achieved the success that it has today were it not for the service of its more than 22,000 volunteers who have given generously of their time, talents, energies, and resources to the youth of Texas. And whereas throughout its proud history, the 4-H program has developed positive role models for countless Texans, and through its innovative and inspiring programs, continues to build character and to instill the values that have made our state strong and great. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Aransas County Commissioners hereby designate October 3rd through 9th, 2021 as National 4-H Week in Texas and commend the 4-H Youth Development Program of the Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service and the many men and women who have made the program a success.
All right. Come on up here, please.
And Judge, they do have a quick presentation.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I'll come up here and that's fine.
Right here. There you go.
Yes, you can double up. Scrunch in.
Get close. All right, congratulations. Thank you very much.
I believe Colin has a video that I sent that is a, for National 4-H Week, we wanted to show something that fun that we've been doing and planning this last year. And it was a new project for us. And I worked on it. And so Aransas County worked on it in conjunction with Calhoun County. And we invited 5 counties. There were 60 kids from 5 different counties along the coast that came to participate in this event. So I'm going to let the video speak for itself, and then I'll introduce RJ Shelley, who helped me plan the event.
Yep.
Oh. It's rained on them all.
And that was our fun, exciting day.
It looks like a good day was had by all, and it might have gotten wet more than two ways, right?
It was a very wet day, especially very wet morning. I want to introduce my counterpart, well, not counterpart, a colleague, Mr. RJ Shelley. He is the Marine agent in Calhoun County. He was one of three of us that planned this event. Emily DeForest, who's the 4-H agent in Calhoun County, couldn't be here today. She's heading to the state fair with some kids. But this event was graciously sponsored by Flatsworthy. Captain Chuck Nizer, who's the president of Flatsworthy, wanted to be here today, but he's out on the water because it's an absolute beautiful day to fish with the client. But we wanted to show off how amazing that event was. It was completely sponsored by Flatsworthy. And actually 4 of the kids that are sitting in this audience participated in the event that day. We had 60 kids from 5 different counties: Matagorda, Aransas, Calhoun, Nueces, and Stampat County that participated in the event. Next year, we're looking to broaden it up to all 18 counties in our district. And we are going to shake it up a little bit. We're going to do an 8 on up grade level event where we can focus on careers and go a little bit more in depth on food, boat safety and things like that. And then the next year we will go and do the 7th on down to 3rd grade. And so we can do some more, more hands-on and just differentiate the instruction for them a little bit.
It's a great program and nice meeting you, sir. Thank you. For
Pleasure to be here. And I think you'll see, we capped it at 60 this year because we wanted to get a handle on the safety. That was the most important thing when you have kids around the water. Of course, we had a bunch of licensed captains out there from Flatsworthy, which are all CPR first aid certified. We had the wardens out there, which are certified. Myself and Emily DeForest, our 4-H agent, are certified life saving also. The program was very well received. Your location here is perfect. The place over there in Little Bay worked out great. And so we're going to expand it district wide. And I think what you're going to see in Aransas County, I was a fishing guide for 27 years before I regulated the oyster industry before I retired and took this job. And so what I think you're going to see here is as we expand this out to all 18 counties in the district, we saw it a little bit this year, but we were tight. We were 5 counties tight right around you. You're going to see the families from the outlying districts, like, the counties like Brenham, they're going to come make a mini vacation out of this. So they're going to come down here. They're going to stay in the hotels for a couple of days so the kids can go to the event. Then hopefully the family, you know how it is. They go out to eat, they buy some souvenirs. So it ought to benefit the area in the long term. And it's really good for the kids.
Very good.
That's the main thing.
Especially it gets them outside and with the whole COVID thing the last couple of years, that's a healthy activity.
Yeah.
And it gets them away from the buttons, So appreciate you letting me come.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything you're doing. All right. Next, we have another recognition presentation, Proclamation 14, 2021, recognition and appreciation for John Crowell's 2-year service, Aransas County Veterans Service Officer. John's here with his family, so would you read the proclamation?
Okay. Proclamation P 14, 2021, recognizing John Kroll, Veteran Service Officer for Aransas County. Whereas the mission of the Aransas County Veterans Service Office is to ensure that veterans, their dependents, and survivors receive the Earned Veterans Administration, the VA, benefits to which they are entitled, and to create a positive impact on our veterans and their families by making life better. Whereas on September 1st, 2019, John Kroll assumed the position of the Veteran Service Officer for Aransas County. Whereas John brought with him over 30 years' experience, having served in the United States Navy as a Navy law enforcement specialist from June 1980 through November 1990, and from June 2005 through October 2008, at which time he retired BU-2 and then served as a volunteer veteran coordinator with the PTSD Foundation of America. Whereas during his service as the county's veteran service officer, John counseled, advised, and assisted many military service veterans, veteran survivors, and their dependents about their rights under the Military Service Benefits Act and other relevant legislation. And whereas John also served as liaison with the Texas Veterans Commission and other county, local, and state agencies and veterans organizations as needed. Now, therefore, we, the Aransas County Commissioners Court, wish to recognize, acknowledge, and profusely thank John Kroll for his proven service as a veteran service officer for Aransas County. We wish you nothing but good health and happiness in your well-deserved retirement.
John, you and your family, please come up.
Everybody in? They're all right. Done. You do it pretty good. Put your stamp on that. Get to you later. Okay? Thank you very much for everything.
All right, we have another presentation, the National Wildlife Federation, Texas Midcoast Assessment. Are they here? Or-
We're on
No?
video, Judge.
Okay, come on, talk to us.
All right, so here comes our presentation. While that gets loaded, I'll say good morning to you all and thank you so much for allowing us to present our new report with you. I'm Amanda Fuller with National Wildlife Federation, and today my colleague Arsam Pathak and I will be presenting today. So if you're not familiar with National Wildlife Federation, which I hope you are, we're a science-based advocacy organization. We're one of the nation's oldest and largest conservation organizations. And our Texas Coast and Water team heavily focuses on coastal resilience through nature-based solutions, as well as policy solutions to ensure that enough fresh water reaches our bays and estuaries on the coast. Next slide. So this is just a quick look at how we hope to spend our time with y'all this morning. And we'll try to move quickly so we've got some time for questions and any discussion. But we're going to talk to you about why we did this project. We're going to talk about what we know in terms of climate change projections in the county, explore some solutions, and then talk about next steps. Next slide. So we appreciate Aransas County's participation in developing and seeking funding for really good tier 1 projects with the GLO's Coastal Resiliency Master Plan. So the county is a leader in ecosystem restoration and coastal resilience generally. I personally know this from my days years ago and working on Deepwater Horizon oil spill funding opportunities and coming to the county with ideas and watching y'all take off with those. It seems like the state has been extremely focused on the upper coast, especially after Harvey. And so when we conceptualized this project a couple of years ago, we felt as though the mid-coast really needed more easily accessible and actionable science. And so we want your county and your neighboring counties to be able to compete better for the myriad funding opportunities available, which we'll highlight some of those as we move through the presentation. So we hope that this information, as well as our efforts at National Wildlife Federation, can add to your capacity and help you seek additional dollars for ecologically sound projects to shore up the coast. So I'll hand it over to Arsam to walk through our findings, and you can go ahead and advance to the next slide.
Thanks, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. My name is Arsam Pathak, and I'm the Adaptation and Coastal Resilience Specialist at the National Wildlife Federation's Texas Coast and Water Program. So I want to start with a big thank you to Judge Mills and all the other commissioners for for this opportunity for us to present today. As Amanda said, we really appreciate the work the county leadership is doing in terms of ecosystem restoration and just building a overall resilient coastline in the region. So I want to start with sharing some information regarding climate-related risks and basically talk about how these risks can have multiple cascading impacts on the entire county. So in Aransas County and around the Midcoast, what we know is that the sea levels are rising in Rockport, and this is a graph by NOAA, which shows that the sea levels have increased almost at the rate of 6 millimeter per year over the last 80 years or so. And there are two main reasons for this. So the first one is the global factors, which includes warming of oceans and melting of glaciers, which expands the water and adds to the existing sea levels that we have currently. But then there are also more localized factors, and this is especially concerning along the Texas coast and the Midcoast, where we're seeing land along the coast. It is subsiding due to a range of human activities, primarily due to resource extraction, which includes oil, gas, and groundwater extraction. So moving on to the next slide. Now, so we know sea levels are rising, but we want to see what does that actually mean for the county. And the first and one of the most significant consequences of sea level rise is potential inundation, which what it means is that the land is so chronically flooded throughout the year that it actually becomes uninhabitable for us to live or carry on any other human activities. So in our assessment, we looked at 4 different sea level rise scenarios, and these are all based on NOAA's sea level rise projections. And they essentially considers how greenhouse gas emissions will evolve in the future and include a lot of other local factors that I mentioned earlier. So these 4 scenarios, they range from an intermediate low scenario, which is about a 3 feet increase in sea level rise, which is almost a best case scenario. And then they go all the way up to intermediate high, which is about a 7 feet increase to a high sea level rise, which is a 9 feet increase in water levels. So moving on to next slide. Now, these are some zoomed in parts of the Rockport-Fulton coastline. I think this map, it gives a really good sense of how these different scenarios and how the extent of inundation will change with these different scenarios that we're looking at. Moving on to next slide. So after inundation, another consequence of sea level rise is that our present day storms will change. And that's essentially because the surge is now on top of an elevated water level. So basically what a category 1 or 2 storm, say for example, Nicholas, the surge, what looks today is very different from what it looked 100 years ago. And it's going to look different in the next 50 or 100 years. So this is an example. This is Goose Island State Park. And if you move to next slide, please. So now if a storm makes landfall on Matagorda Island, this is what a present day surge looks like at the state park. So if you see, it actually barely gets flooded. But next slide, please. Now, if you add an intermediate low sea level rise to the storm surge model, the park is likely to become prone to storm surge flooding in the future. Now, what I mean here is that is that there are new areas that are becoming at-risk sites. And overall, there are new vulnerabilities that are emerging with the changing climate in the region. Next slide, please. Now half of the Aransas County is covered with wetlands. So it's really important for us to look at the impacts, and we wanted to highlight the extent of erosion and the losses that may take place in the National Wildlife Refuge. So on the map, you can see parts of Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, and just with an intermediate low sea level rise, you can see the freshwater wetlands along the bay. They're prone to inundation and likely to convert to open water with the intrusion of salt water. Now, the same is true about the saltwater wetlands that are located in the Matagorda Island unit of the refuge. Seawater intruding and eroding the wetlands in the region. Moving on, next slide, please. Now, finally, the last impact that we looked into was how high tide flooding would change. So basically, sea level rise will lead to an increase in high tide flooding days. Now, high tide is when the tide is so elevated that it starts spilling onto streets and start damaging the public infrastructure, including roads and storm drains. And the map on the screen, it shows areas that are currently prone to high tide flooding. So, and this is interesting because at the beginning of this century, we used to have one high tide flood day per year. Now, last year, the data from Rockport Tide Gauge, it observed 11 high tide flood days, which was the highest ever recorded on that tide gauge. And then with an increase in sea level rise, these flood days are projected to increase even more in the future to somewhere around 60 to 160 days. So we can expect the almost half a year where the land is getting flooded with high tide events. So moving on, next slide, please. Now, all these impacts, they have severe socioeconomic and environmental implications for the county. So first of all, critical facilities, sites like town halls and post offices and schools, all really important in the functioning of the towns and cities. So we found about 44 such facilities. They're vulnerable to an intermediate low sea level rise scenario, which is again about a 3 feet increase. Then fisheries and wildlife are all at risk due to changes in their habitat. Primarily, we talked about Aransas Bay and the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. And of course, whooping cranes, that's a primary concern due to the habitat losses at Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. And all of this trickles down into the tourism-driven economy of the county, impacts the ecotourism and the fishery-based tourism that the county offers. And I think this really allows us to see the compound and cascading impacts that I mentioned in the beginning. So what we're looking at in the future in terms of climate variability is these multiple impacts on the socioeconomic and environmental part of the state, the county. Next slide, please. Moving on, so social vulnerability, it basically means that different members of a community, they will be impacted differently based on a lot of different factors, including their race, their socioeconomic status, age and the resources that they have access to. So all these factors, they play a really important role in how resilient you are when an extreme event hits, but also how you adapt and cope post disasters and to other long-term future climatic changes. So the point that I really want to highlight here is that as the county prepares for these future threats, and we have heard from multiple sources that you're all doing a great job in doing that. But the point we want to highlight is that where the areas where social vulnerabilities are higher, it can aid your future planning efforts in terms of building those resilient systems. Next slide, please. Finally, we want to talk about creative, innovative solutions to tackle these impacts. So basically, using natural features and materials and processes, it's called nature-based solutions. And this is an umbrella term that basically includes conserving and restoring natural features, so wetlands and beaches. It also includes approaches such as conservation easements and flood buyouts, and then hybrid solutions such as living shorelines. So the goal of these nature-based solutions is not only to reduce coastal erosion and storm surge, but also add to the community resilience by providing multiple benefits to our communities and wildlife. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it over to Amanda Fuller to share some of the funding and policy interventions that can actually help the county to tap into these nature-based solutions.
Yeah, so moving to the next slide. I think it's important to stress that this is not a doom and gloom situation. So I know we've shown a lot of maps and provided some data that may make it feel that way, but there honestly have never been more opportunities to stave off these impacts at the local level, which, you know, from our perspective is a really empowering thing. So you can see the projects in the county that are currently listed as Tier 1 projects in the Coastal Master Plan on the right-hand side of the slide. And then on the left, we listed some of the major ongoing, so reliable funding opportunities that ideally the projects would be pairing with throughout these funding cycles. And so I'll continue to always push Deepwater Horizon oil spill dollars because we've got about 10 more years of that payout coming to the state and additional competitions. We're highlighting FEMA's new program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, or the BRIC program, where you've got to submit applications to TDM for them to move them forward for consideration by FEMA. And then obviously the CAPRA and the CMP program are being primarily funded right now through Go Mesa dollars, Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act funds. And so that's right now about $40 million annually. So lots of opportunity there. Next slide, please. And so the last thing we want to kind of hit on here is, in addition to, you know, getting money for projects on the ground, as elected officials, we need your support to get enabling conditions at the policy level for nature-based solutions, non-structural solutions, really the more innovative kind of new ways of thinking about shoring up our coast. We need these to move forward. And so I know y'all are familiar with environmental flow standards and how important that is to the region. That law, it's a different Senate Bill 3 than the one the legislature recently passed. This is back from 2007. That law needs improvements. And so as we look forward to 2023 legislative session, we've got an eye towards that. TCQ is going through sunset review right now, and we're looking at that as well as a vehicle for making some changes in how they implement the existing law. Also, something worth noting as it relates to adequate flow, the Texas Water Trust got a little bit of a bump up in this past legislative session through a bill. It's HB 2225, and that bill enables Texas Parks and Wildlife Department to help recruit and steward water rights into the Texas Water Trust. And that would be for the benefit of the environment, so that flows make it down to bays and estuaries. Additionally, on the policy level of how we talk about building resilient coastlines and helping communities with their capacity, we need the state to be incorporating climate change data better. That was kind of played out in a little bit of a battle in this last legislative session. We did get a little bit of that moving forward through the most recent SB3. But we need more of that. We really need a little bit more standardization of how our state includes this type of information in our planning. And then we need more conditions for communities to better plan and bring folks to the table who have really important lived experiences in these storms. So not just relying on data, not just relying on experts and scientists, but let's get the communities at the table and pay them for their time to do that. So that's really important. And then next slide, please. Just on next steps. I'm sure y'all know this. We're updating the Coastal Resiliency Master Plan. So there's going to be a 2023 version. We've got Josh Oyer's contact information here from the GLO. He's kind of the main point of contact on that. And he is always pleading for folks to please call him and tell him, what projects do you have that you think are a good fit for that plan? And then we're also going to ask you to consider working with TDM as they update the state's hazard mitigation plan. And so right now the state is going to go for what's called an enhanced hazard mitigation plan. And what that does is it gets us access to additional federal dollars than the type of plan we currently have. So we need folks to be reaching out to TDM to ensure that the plan adequately represents the hazards that are experienced in Aransas County and identifies a robust suite of solutions, including natural infrastructure. And lastly, please consider us as a resource, National Wildlife Federation, other conservation groups in the state. Our only aim here is to make the Texas coast stronger and more resilient for people and for wildlife. And we'd really appreciate help in engaging your neighboring counties in this as well. So that's it for us. The last slide has contact information, and we just really appreciate this opportunity and welcome any discussion now or later.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very interesting. Anybody have any questions for her?
I would like to get a copy of your presentation, please. It wasn't included in the packet.
Yes, I agree with that. That's what I need.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, ladies, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have another presentation from Amanda Oster about the resolution of the Aransas Pass annexation case. Which took 2 years.
Yes. Good morning, Judge, Commissioners. So I don't believe that you have this presentation yet, but just so you know, it is going to be available. It might already be available as of this morning. So I'm not going to read you word for word what is in this presentation, but I do want to kind of give you a brief overview. So this case began 2 years ago in 2019. So as a little background, so originally there was a case brought about by a group of citizens called the Association Against Annex Abuse. And though the name of their group is in the style of this case, they are not parties to this case directly. So there is still a separate case that was not settled through our case that was up on the appeals and by an order of abatement, which I won't go into what all that means, but that's settled separately because we are not representing anyone in that case. So after that was filed, a quo warrantor was filed both in Aransas County and San Patricio County. And those cases were joined together into one lawsuit. And that's the case that my office has been handling since the beginning of this year. And previously, my predecessor handled it before then. So And that's the style of the case. If anyone wants to get any of the records, trust me, they're voluminous. So if you want to request them, it will be boxes and boxes of information. So in March of 2019, the City of Aransas Pass wanted to annex as much property as they could before a change in the annex laws took place that fall. So House Bill 347 changed the way that cities could annex property in the state of Texas. So there were a lot of changes in several cities, not just Aransas Pass, took the opportunity to try and annex property before that House bill went into effect. And the purpose of the House bill was so that people could not be involuntarily annexed any further. So if currently we wanted to annex any property, it would generally be by request, by petition. We would have to vote. It wouldn't just be because we wanted to annex them. So if someone came to the county and said, I would really like you to annex my property, then we could take that under consideration. But this was under an involuntary annexation. So there are a lot of basic requirements even at the time on what you needed to do to involuntary annex property. So you had to send out specific notices that required certain information at very specific times, and you had to provide it both to the property owners and also to entities that service those areas, such as school districts, water districts, things of that nature. They all had to receive written notice. And that was so that anyone would have the opportunity to go and be part of the process, to go to the meetings and be aware of what was going to happen with their property. Because all of those property owners ended up having to pay taxes once they were annexed into the city limits. One of the things the city also needs to do when annexing is create something called a 3-year plan. And during that 3-year plan, citizens are made aware that their property could be annexed, and they go through a lot of processes of how are we going to serve them with water and trash and fire and police and all of that. So this also allows the people who own the property to decide what they're going to do in that 3 years. Maybe you're not going to put in a new well. Maybe you're not going to make some changes to your property because those services are going to be provided to you by the city. Or perhaps you're going to sell your property. Or perhaps you decide, well, I'm not going to be able to use my property for what I wanted to, so then I'm going to sell it to someone else who can put better use to it.
Shut up.
Judge Mills, I'm going to take your phone. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this is a very complex case, and I'm not going to go into all the details. So the last amended petition that was filed by the state was 73 pages long, and nobody wants me to read that to them. So we're just going to do a really brief summary of what happened. Okay. So the allegations from the state against the city of Aransas Pass were in multitude, like I said, 73 pages long. So some of the things that did not happen that should have happened during the annexation were that notices should have went to all of the school district that were serving the property, that all of the public entities and political subdivisions, such as the navigation district, should have received proper notice. Special districts, such as the groundwater conservation district, should have received proper notice. And there should have been an adequate service plan. And service plans can be rather complex, and they aren't just, we need to provide water, but we're going to have to pay to have all these services provided. And how are we going to do that? And throughout our discovery process and the several days we were in trial, we came to the realization that none of these things happened correctly. So they were also supposed to prepare something called an inventory of services, which is kind of a list of the services that are already provided in the area in your city. They also wanted to annex areas outside their ETJ, the extraterritorial jurisdiction. So 1 mile outside of the city limits is what's considered your city's ETJ, and you cannot annex further than that. So that was one of the issues. Another issue is that some of the property, the narrowest width point was less than 1,000 feet, which also is not allowed. They did not provide proper service, mailed out or otherwise, to certain parcels of land. And they violated the Open Meetings Act, which can be an issue for public officials that they are trained on and know not to violate. Oops, sorry. Okay. So the original annexation, which was kind of more commonly called the yellow map, this was the original area that the city proposed that they might annex. This was over 18,000 acres, and it contained over 200 tracts of residential land. So this disqualified the city from proceeding without a 3-year annexation plan. And this was the original area. This is the map that they originally showed citizens of what they were going to annex. So back in April 2021, there was a city council meeting where they went into a closed session and then came out stating that they had substantially reduced the amount that they were going to annex, and they gave out this map, which they called phase 1. There are 2 separate parcels of phase 1. They are in green. And this ordinance for phase 1 annexation was adopted in May of 2019. So left is the original map, right is the phase 1 map. As you can tell, it is substantially smaller. And then this is phase 2. So on the same day that they announced phase 1, they also announced that there would be a phase 2. This was approximately 1,400 acres. It's the area highlighted in blue. This contained about 25 residential tracts and then some commercial tracts. And this particular group of property owners were very vocal against wanting to be annexed. So the left is the blue map that was published on the city's website, in the newspaper, in the mailouts that they did mail out. And right is the area that was actually annexed. So the red circles indicate areas that were not given notice, but that were annexed in the final annexation. So the far left circle is an area of less than 1,000 feet wide. And then the area on the far right by the bay did not receive, some of those owners did not receive any notice at all until their property was actually annexed. The phase 3 annexation is in San Patricio County. We joined our 2 lawsuits together because many of the issues were the same. A lot of this property did not have any residential homes on it at all, but there were many people that there were at least a couple of people that didn't receive notice. So, and there's a small area that's by the highway that was annexed, but did not receive notice via this map that they were going to be annexed. Okay, and this is all kind of the annexation plan put together on one map to give you a better idea of what it looks like. The yellow was the original annexation, and then in the middle of the yellow is a green. That's phase 1, then blue is the phase 2, and then the pinkish color on the left side is phase 3. Okay. The city also wanted to do something called a loophole resolution, which was the 23,000 acre area overlapping the other annexation areas. This was essentially all of their ETJ, their extraterritorial jurisdiction. And this would, in their opinion, prevent anyone else from annexing their property in the future. The issue was that, frankly, they didn't even have all of that property. Some of that was actually within the city of Rockport's jurisdiction. So this is a map of the ETJ. It extends about a mile out from the city's limits. And I believe the argument for this would have been in the future that if they decided to annex any of this area, they could have said that they started annexing it before the law changed, so that they didn't have to go through all the same steps they would have to do now. And as you can see, that's a very large area. And there's a small portion to the northern end that's actually in Rockport's ETJ. And those cannot overlap, legally speaking. Okay, so this is what I went over a little bit earlier. The first lawsuit was from a group of property owners. In that case, as far as I know, is still pending. We are not a party to that case, so I may not receive notification if and when it settles. The second suit was the Cor Oronto case filed in this county. The third suit was the Cor Oronto case filed in San Patricio County. And then there is a fourth lawsuit that neither the county nor the state have any involvement in, and that is from Mojave, which is a limited company, and they have sued the city based on not being able to use their property however it is they wish to use it. Because whenever they annexed all this area, it also changed its use and it rezoned it to agricultural use. So many of the people, especially those who lived on the water or owned property on the water, were not going to use their land for agricultural use because it's very valuable property facing the water. That's not generally what you use it for. And that case is still pending, but like I said, our office doesn't have anything to do with that case. So originally this case was set for trial last fall, and then it got reset till this spring, and then it got reset once again until August of this year. So on August 16th, we began a week-long trial, and we were there 8 to 5 basically every day that week. And we heard a lot of testimony from a lot of people. And it became pretty clear through the testimony that we had not received all of the records that were requested during discovery, mostly email messages, that they should have turned over to us during discovery. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the city council members may have violated the Open Meetings Act. A violation of the Open Meetings Act is a criminal offense. So 2 of the members of the City of Aransas Pass City Council had to be read their Miranda warnings while they were testifying in court. After a week in trial, it became apparent that we were not going to finish the case. So we knew we were going to have to reset it for more time. And during the trial, since we did not receive those emails, the judge ordered that the City of Aransas Pass put $100,000 into the registry of the court to pay for an expert to retrieve those emails from them.
Amanda, how many emails were there?
I have no idea. We never received them. So, and so during our recess, because it was a couple of weeks long, my office offered to settle the case for an amount that was over twice what we would have settled it in May. Because at the time that we tried to settle it in May, the counter offer was that they would only de-annex phase 2 and phase 3 if we agreed to allow phase 1 to continue to be annexed, which was not something that we were willing to do. The property owners that are inside that phase have just as many rights as all the rest of our property owners. So we would not consider any offer that would keep any of those people within the City of Aransas Pass's jurisdiction without their permission. So we offered a settlement. And one of the reasons why we offered a settlement was because we knew that whether we won or we lost at trial, it would likely end up in an appeal. And all of these property owners would be stuck paying taxes probably for a couple more years. And the attorney's fees would just keep growing and growing and growing on both sides. And that was not my end goal. My end goal was not to make money for the county. My end goal was to see to it that all of these property owners had their rights restored and that they did not have to continue to pay taxes when they should not have been. So hundreds and hundreds of hours, though, were spent on this case, both by my office and also by David Earle. Some of you might have met him. He was not on retainer from the county. He has not been paid to do work on this case. He was obviously hoping to get paid at some point, But the end goal would only be if we won and if we were awarded attorney's fees. So I think I got a bit ahead of myself on my notes. Okay. So the terms of our settlement would be that all of the annexation ordinances and the 21,000 resolution, the loophole that we saw, would be void upon inception, which means those people were not de-annexed because they legally were never annexed in the first place. So though we can't go back in time, that's essentially what this order is trying to do. So they were also ordered to pay $750,000 in attorney's fees and $65,000 in costs. And we did the calculation for attorney's fees. And if everyone got paid as much as they worked, which would be a blessing, but it's not going to happen here, Mr. Earl and his office would have been awarded over $1 million in attorney's fees just themselves, not including the hundreds of hours spent by county officials and county employees. So this agreement didn't make any of us whole, but that wasn't the goal. Wasn't to make the city of Aransas Pass pay as much as possible. It was to be able to compensate the people who did work on this case, but more importantly, end it so that the citizens are able to move forward and use their property as they wish. So they are ordered to pay that in full by December 15th. And if they don't, then there is something called liquidated damages, which essentially means they have to pay $5,000 for every day that they're late. I'm certain that they won't be late. I'm sure that they will make that happen. But so after we were able to come to an agreement, the agreed judgment was filed in the case and it was approved by the judge. So the $100,000 that was originally put in the state's registry for an expert were turned over to the county of Aransas via the state of Texas, since they weren't spent on expert fees because we settled the case. So a small portion of what has been owed the county has been paid. And the rest, like I said, are due by December 15th. So later on in this meeting, I will be asking that Mr. Earl be paid for the time that he spent on this case. We will never be able to pay him, and he doesn't anticipate that we will pay him the full amount that he's worked for. But one of the things that we did in this agreement was try to limit the amount of effect it will have on the taxpayers, even though they don't live here, because they are our neighbors and we want to be able to move forward with them. And it was never our goal to bankrupt them or to make them, you know, an eye for an eye or anything like that, because I do know that the city's attorneys have been paid more than what they are going to pay us. Okay. Any questions?
Is it likely that their expenses are probably paid by their insurance from?
I know that some of their expenses were paid through the Texas Municipal League, but I also know that they stopped being paid from them earlier this year. And I do not know whether or not they had to refund that money to them. But the money paid to us, no, will not be paid, but from the Texas Municipal League.
Well, I'd personally like to commend you and your staff for all your hard work, and David Earl for all his hard work for the citizens of Aransas County that did not want to be annexed.
Right.
Great job. Thank you.
Amanda, I think your attitude is commendable, that we're not looking to really punish. We're just looking to make sure that we're doing what the law says you're going to do. So thank you for that too.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your taking on all this work on behalf of the homeowners, the property owners out there who deserve to say what was going to happen to their property, even though the county, doesn't stand to make money off of it. It was a good thing to do to protect their legal rights.
Right. And we're not going to make any money off of this, but we are not losing any money off of it either. So that's really the end goal, is the citizens will restored to where they should have been the whole time, and the county has not lost anything because of it.
I just need to keep in mind that that the residents that are in Aransas Pass, that are in Aransas County, are also going to have to pay their share of this cost that the city is going to assess to them. I wish there was something we could do for that, but there's not. But I did not meet a single person that lived in Aransas Pass that was opposed to the Aransas County suing Aransas Pass on their behalf. So they're kind of caught in a conundrum. However, this is one of those things where the public outpour of comments and everything was 100% behind Aransas County. I did not hear or see one indication of citizens of Aransas County that was opposed to this. Also, I was involved in it from the very beginning. I brought it to the court for their consideration to do this, and I'm just telling you that's the way it was. And this has been a very eye-opening situation for me to see how cities, not just Aransas Pass, but cities across the state have abused the annexation power. I made a statement 4 or 5 years ago that if Aransas Pass wanted to go and protect themselves from getting Corpus Christi's ETJ, that there was a simple way to just annex a strip 1,000 foot wide across agricultural land to Port Bay, and that would have blocked them 100% from Aransas Pass and from Rockport. But they wouldn't do that. So this is the consequence. And I want to thank Amanda publicly, and Jen, because she put so much time in on that. And David Earl's just been awesome. He probably got paid a third of what he would if it was on an hour per hour fee basis.
Right. We wouldn't have been able to afford him if we were paying him out.
Anyway, I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you so
Amanda,
much.
I think, remember reading in your press release that the citizens who've been paying taxes there in that pseudo-annexed area for the last couple of years are going to have their taxes refunded. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have any idea what the total amount is roughly?
I would not. I would have had to have done a request from the city of Aransas Pass to know the total. And I don't know how they plan on repaying that, but it is something that they have to do. That's a good question for them to ask the city.
Does our tax collector collect for Aransas Pass? They do. In Aransas County.
Well, yes, but to be fair, I have more things to do, but I really hope that if they don't get their taxes returned timely, that they do look into that, because the city does need to come up with some sort of plan on how they're going to do it.
And we need to make sure that we get our money by the time they're supposed to, because those other lawsuits are going to tax them again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda.
All right, under considered agenda, we have 3 items.
I move to approve consent agenda item as printed.
Motion made. Second, Commissioner Castleline. Roll call. Any discussion?
I just have one question, Valerie. You're still here. Great. Could you just tell me what dates the transfer station will be open? I mean, I understand Christmas Eve, they're going to take on December 23rd. Christmas Day, they'll take on Saturday, December 24th. But can you tell me after Christmas Day,
It'll go
which would
back,
be the Sunday, what days would they be open?
it'll go back to regular scheduled. So Tuesday
Okay.
after Christmas, they'll open.
And then if there's going to be anything going on with New Year's, you'll just bring that to us at a different time.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further discussion. Roll call.
Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner Castleline.
Aye.
Commissioner Reese,
Aye.
Mr. Lava,
Aye.
Judge Nelson.
Aye. Unanimous. Item number 8. Can we do this at the same time as 9? I mean, we're discussing. So, anyway. We want to discuss excavator and track hole.
Are you coming up, David?
Come on up.
first, we try not to use the word track hoe anymore, excavator. We had 5 bids. The lowest bid that met all the specifications was from Holt Cat. And that's the one I recommend that we select.
I went through these and sort of scored them from A to F based on where you had yeses and nos. And I came up with the middle one, which like you said, is Holt Cat is having the A, and then the others I was throwing out because they had a few no's or they had a lot of no's. And
Right.
that's how you're looking at it too, based on the criteria you established for what you wanted the equipment.
Correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
In my business career, I used a lot of those companies you have on there, and Whole Cat is by far superior service company than anybody else on that list.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, I have a motion on item number 9.
I move to approve the bid selected for excavator tractor hoe, which was submitted by Holt Cat, and authorize the county engineer to purchase excavator track hoe at the bid price, which,
Second.
well, the bid price before the trade-in was $220,794. And then we get a trade-in of $72,000. So whatever that difference would be.
148,793.98.
All right, motion made and seconded, Mr. Castelline. Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Commissioner Cheney.
Aye.
Commissioner Castleton.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item number 10, do I have a motion?
I move to approve authorizing advertising a request for qualifications for professional engineering services relating to drainage study for the Lamar Beach Road at 4th Street watershed, with funding for such engineering costs being paid out of flood control item 220, 611, 525 special projects.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded, Mr. Cheney. Any discussion?
Do you have anything you want to tell us about this, David?
The rough cost outline.
I think the cost is going to be 25, 30,000. It's hard to know until we actually define, get some qualifications and see what the scope needs to be.
And you've got that in your budget.
Yes. And we have problems in this drainage area. This is part of the upper end of it, is that Conlin Street and the golf course that we do have problems. I expect to be doing some work in the golf course, and I want to make sure that we're not causing problems downstream by fixing problems upstream. And so doing a drainage study, actually modeling the watershed, will help us make sure that we're not going to do something we don't intend to.
Any further discussion? Not, roll call.
Commissioner Cheney.
Aye.
Commissioner Castleton.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye. Okay, item number 10, 11, county airport.
I move to approve authorizing the airport manager to petition the Texas Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration to request that approximately 28 acres of land located within the boundaries of the Aransas County Airport be released from the requirement that it be dedicated to aviation uses in order for the airport to offer the property for long-term lease and development for uses that may not be related to aviation.
Second, Commissioner Castelline. Mr. Greer.
And good morning, and Colin's got a slideshow here for you. Okay, we'll start rolling it. So this is going to be a pretty lengthy process if we're if y'all decide to move forward with it. There will be I'd be coming back to you at different points before anything was final, but we'd be right now on step 2, where I'm asking the Commissioners Court for approval to move forward. I've already identified the land to be released with the help of the Economic Development Corporation on land that they think is going to be the most available, or the land that would be most attractive to a third party. There is a chance that we may just decide that we want the airport to manage the land and do individual leases. That's something we could think about down the road. So what I'm really asking for at this point is to be able to spend the money for a survey and appraisal to help put our packet together. Now, I did put a packet together, just kind of a preliminary what if, and sent that up the chain to TxDOT to the compliance office. I have a good relationship with those folks, and they were willing to look at it for me. They replied back, looks like you're on the right track. That's basically their response to it. So I know pretty much what they're still going to be looking for is the thing that we don't know, which is who are we going to lease that land to. There may be an opportunity that down the road we could kind of push pause on this. I don't know if they're going to be willing to do that or not. But again, my goal here is to at least get the ball rolling and then start having the discussion with TxDOT and then ultimately FAA, but then also with the EDC to find out who we can get to come in and take over that lease for us. And then the leaseholder would be responsible for infrastructure or any improvements on the land. So there's a benefit to the airport for this. Obviously, everything has to be done at fair market value. We're required to do that. So the appraisal would help us come to determine what the fair market value is. But the money from any land lease or any revenues gained from this would go into a fund to take a long-term project for the airport and then provide money to do it. So in 2006, my predecessor did this with the help of the Commissioner's Court and with the state and FAA to release some land on Airport Road. It was clearly surplus. It was never going to be used for aviation purposes. It was across a road and outside the game fence. We're never going to extend the runway any further that direction. So it made sense to call it surplus and release it. But Gene had a project that he could show was readily available for the money. And that was the repair or the rebuild of a runway. And we don't have anything that's pressing that I could say that we would spend this money on, but we could definitely find something out of the master plan that's 20 to 30 years down the road that we could say we would want to be putting this money in a bank account for that. So this money will never be, any money we make off this project will never be put into the operating fund for the airport. I won't be able to use it for electricity or fuel or salaries, but it'll always be there to help fund a project that otherwise would have come from the airport fund by the time we get around to it. So, and again, I don't think that's going to be the biggest issue. So the next thing we would do is after the survey and appraisal, I would prepare the packet with the cover letter in a 15 question questionnaire that the state provides to us. And that's what I filled out initially whenever I sent it up the chain to TxDOT to just kind of fish for this a little bit. And they liked it. So, but what I would rely heavily on the EDC for is to help me get that as professionally and legally appropriate to be sent up the chain. It needs to be in the form of binders and I know pretty much how it has to look. So I'd like to have some help with that. Then it would be submitted for TxDOT for review. If TxDOT likes it and they want to send it up the chain, then TxDOT would pay for an environmental assessment to cover all of our bases, make sure everything that we're proposing is going to comport with what FAA is going to wants this how this should look with FAA. Then next it would go to the Fort Worth office, the regional office. They would look at it. If they found anything wrong with it, it would get kicked back. And then ultimately it would go to FAA in Washington, D.C. for a 30-day comment period. And then we would be allowed to have the release. So let's look at the next slide here. And I know it's really hard to read. Anybody wants a more detailed copy of this, I can give it to you. But that's the flow chart. We're on the far left and the far right is the objective. Anything that gets you to the far right, which is the end, without going all the way to the bottom right and coming back up is basically a failure. So the only money we would be wasted is whatever it cost me in time to do it, the survey, and then the appraisal. I estimate those to be between $5,000 and $7,000. I don't have that budgeted for this year. But there is money that I can project will be available by the end of the year to be able to move over to there with a budget line item transfer at the end. Okay, if you'll let us see the next one, please. So this is the land that I've identified as most available. That's north is to the top of the picture. The first little spot of land there is about 3.5 acres right off of Highway 35. It's really close to electricity, water, sewer. I think that land would probably be a little bit more valuable. Then you can see we kind of skip over what is you can't see it there. It's not depicted, but I'll get to it in a minute. That's an approach corridor for one of our runways. And that is a very seriously guarded and piece of property that we need to make sure that we never allow anything higher than a treetop to get in there. And even treetops, we have to do what we can to mitigate them. So we own a navigation easement that direction off of airport property onto the RV park that's back there as well. And I have had to mitigate trees through there. So we want to watch that property. You can't build anything in there. And then right on the other side of that to the left is another almost 7 acres that again is still pretty close to there's a lift station there at the neighborhood that's owned by Miss Betty Adams. There's a chance that we'd be able to tie into that for sewer, but you definitely have water and electricity a lot closer there as well. Then you get on the other side, that big yellow square, that's another 17 or so acres that we could look at. Doesn't necessarily have to be involved in this request, but it's something that I think that we should look at some point, just because it's really not doing anything for us right now. It's sitting there. So there's money being left on the table, in my opinion, with respect to our land at the airport, because I can look forward easily in the next 20, 25 years and tell you we'll never need it. But the way general aviation is going, probably the next 100 years, it's never going to be needed. And so I think that the money, the land sitting there like that is money on the table for us. And so we only have 4 ways to make money at the airport, and land lease is has the highest returns, the highest margin, because it doesn't cost us anything except we do put a little bit of money into it in the fact that we have to mow it. So if you lease it to somebody else, then mowing it becomes their job. And then finally, on the far left side, the orange is just something that's again, more land that later we might look at leasing. But with that, there would be more aviation access, so to speak. You can see the taxiway and the runway on the far left side. They're a lot closer to that area. It would be easy. It's conceivable that you could build a taxiway over there. So if you wanted to put in something that was more aviation friendly or aviation specific, parts manufacturing, anybody that needed a taxiway to the runway to fly their product out or fly their end product out to their customers, then that does work, and they do that in other places around, especially around Texas. Dallas-Fort Worth is a big hub for Vought Aircraft, and Vought Aircraft partnered with the city of Grand Prairie to use an old military air base, Naval Air Station Dallas, that otherwise would have just fallen into disrepair or been turned into farmland. But Grand Prairie basically had a tenant ready to go, and this kind of thing was done for the entire airport. So it's conceivable that if we found a partner that wanted to have a taxiway to their leased land, that's the more likely place to do it right there.
I think we need to always keep in mind the value of that piece of property there in case of a hurricane during cleanup, like we did.
Sure. And
Harvey, and we're more and more the large tracts. I know Valerie and I did a survey around the county when she was doing a plan prior to Harvey, looking for areas that you could take materials and clean up and stuff, and there virtually aren't any.
Well, if I can add to that, so what you don't see here pictured is the areas that are south on Airport Road. There's a lot of land down there, but Valerie and I sidestepped a pretty big restriction with respect to having a dump or a cleanup on an airport. Those kind of things attract birds, and birds are the kind of thing you want to be able to avoid attracting at an airport. So, it would never be anything permanent, but like you said, it may be, with an emergency declaration and an order from the judge, we could get it. That's what we did the last time, and it worked. But we still have a lot of land available for that, and I'd be happy to show you. And I wish I had a little bit bigger picture, but if you come down off Airport Road, we have a closed runway and a closed taxiway over there that Crowder Gulf used to pile up all the.
But we use all of that in Harvey.
We used a lot of it.
We used that and this piece there too.
But on the corner of Airport Road and 30 or 1781, there's still more land down there that could be used for the vegetation side, just as much. We ended up using, it was only about 10 or 11 acres back there that we used for the vegetation mulch operation. Phil, let me
Mike, what
see.
is the size of the orange section?
That's about 35 acres.
Thank you.
Mike, on the revenue side on that, if that ceases to be aviation oriented, would that money stay with the airport, or would that
Yes.
come to general fund?
It'd be with the airport fund, but it would be, like I said at the very beginning, this would be money that wouldn't go into the airport operational fund.
Okay. Why
It would
would
go
that be
in
in the airport fund if it wasn't being used for?
because of the grant agreement when the airport was given to the county in 1948 by the War Department. There's a perpetual agreement that it has to, number one, be operated as an airport, but number two, any money or any sale of land from that original plot of land has to benefit the airport fund.
What about sales tax?
That'd be up to the community. It'd be up to the taxing jurisdiction.
Well, it said revenue generator, so I didn't know where that.
Yeah, well, that's off the land lease. Yes, sir. Mhm. If you let me see the next one. Thank you, Colin.
Well, I'm in favor of you looking to see if we can do it, but I don't want to go forward thinking we've already got some plan in mind as to what we're going to do. I mean, we can always use additional revenue, but I agree with Commissioner Castelline. We could have had a whole lot more debris than what we had. And, whenever we had to use the middle of the highway for, 5, 6, 7 miles to do it, I mean, we were full.
Right.
And-
Again, well, I would just add to that, the slippery slope is the FAA.
Yeah.
At some point, they say, that's not what this land is intended for. You need to find another place to put your debris. And again, we sidestepped it because it was obviously a very major hurricane hit us right straight on.
I'm
We got a
talking
lot
about a major hurricane. I'm not talking about some tropical storm.
Right. So this is the, when I showed you the little area we wanted to protect on John Wendell Road, this is a survey of it. And that's there's some restrictions, height restrictions in there. It gives us an exact blueprint to work with as far as staying away from that. So when I hired the surveyor to come do the work, this is the chart that we're going to use to make sure we stay off of that property. Because I guarantee you the state will be looking at this.
Is that piece wet?
Some of it
Often
is.
enough to be classified as wetland?
Well, that's a dirty word with respect to aviation. So nothing is a wetland.
I
It's
would
just a
guess it
retention
might be.
pond. Yeah, it's a retention pond. And the property that's behind it or to the north of it, that drains down into the retention pond, comes into our outfalls, which are the two ditches on either side of John Wendell Road. They go down to 35 and then ideally go across 35 down into the Aransas Bay. But the other side of 35 is not cleaned out right now. That this TxDOT's working on it. Lionel with Road and Bridge has surveyed it. He's looked at it. It's something I think we're going to be able to get done, and that'll really pull a lot of the water away. If you've been down John Wendell Road recently, you've seen that we have some willow trees starting to grow right in that approach path. So I've either at some point got to wait out there with a chainsaw and cut them down, or wait until we get some good drainage so that I can get in there with the tractor. But right now, our tractor would be sunk for archaeologists to discover one day. The next one, please. So this is the verbiage that FAA is going to want to see in any lease that we do with any prospective leaseholder or whoever we decide to do business with. And just the highlights are going to be the fact that whoever goes over there is going to have to understand that noise is going to it could be a problem for them, but they can never complain about it or get legal with it. That's going to prohibit the erection of any structure that would be an obstruction for air navigation in that area. Anything that goes up over there has got to be reviewed by TxDOT and FAA, and that's even after we decide on a lease. So this process is going to take 18 months at the minimum. But then whoever leases the land from us, if they're going to build any infrastructure over there that's going upward vertical, that has to get approved as well. And so that's a 15, 16 week process, and it's getting longer every single day because of other things that the government's tasked with.
So if they put a subdivision or a little shopping center out there, even though we have the authority to, we would have the authority to do that before they can do anything, they still have to go through all the FAA
That's right.
regulations. So it's like double protection.
Yes, sir. And then Let's see. So we talked a little bit about too with the wetlands. You can't do anything that's going to interfere with aviation. So that's one of there are more things. It's easier to say the things that do interfere with aviation than don't. So obviously anything that's going to attract wildlife or birds, that's going to be a big no-no. And then finally down at the bottom, it does say that we that whoever leases the land and that we as the custodians of the lease and of the land would file a 7460-1, which is the FAA form for airspace study. And then again, this is language that they're going to require be in our lease. So whatever lease we write with the county attorney's office, this has to be an addendum. Next one, please. Thank you. So these are some things to consider. So first we have to designate an improvement project, which I've told you, I could name you 4 or 5, but we'll settle on one. And what I'd like to do is also consider the fact that this is going to be a long-term lease. Obviously, when we lease the land, it could be as far as 30 years. So I would like to kind of pick a project that's down toward the end of the projects on the master list. It's going to be, let's see, obviously we talked about the money that comes in has got to go to the airport fund. The FAA is not going to consider how this land release is going to benefit our local economy. That's the one that nobody seems to really wrap their head around. They're only going to care about the airport fund, and then civil aviation. How does it affect those things? That's what they care about. So that's why we were never really able to strike a deal for a FEMA dome at the airport, even though FEMA's a federal agency. The FAA doesn't care anything about FEMA. So they don't. So anytime we start talking about, this is going to be a great revenue driver for the airport, but at the same time, could potentially bring jobs, could bring employers into our community. That consideration is going to have to be political in nature. So, maybe if we have some folks that have connections. I know I've talked to Senator Cruz about it. He felt like that it wasn't anything that the FAA would consider. And at the time, Senator Cruz was the chair of the Senate Aviation Committee. So if he's telling me he doesn't think that political support is going to help us get this done by other than following the exact process, I'm not sure who could, maybe the president. But anyway, that's, do I have one more after that? Or is that it? Is that it? Okay. So at this time, I'll take any questions from you.
I don't know that I have any questions, Mike, but I have a few things I would like to say as the liaison from the court to the Airport Advisory Board. And admittedly, that's only been for this year since I'm only this year on court. But I do have concerns about this, and I've visited with you about my concerns. I've visited with the judge. Not that it would be a bad idea, but just because it is so speculative, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Because the FAA, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we do this, they want 4 things identified. They want the lessee or the buyer identified, not just there would be someone interested. They want it identified. They want the purpose of what that land would be used for identified. They want to know the fair market value of the land. What would we be selling or leasing that land for? And then they would want to know, how's the airport going to use that? And as you said, it cannot be for operations and maintenance. It has to be a special project, just like Gene Johnson identified a special project and used it for that. And although you may be able to come up with some projects, none is defined in this particular issue. And without those, I don't believe it's going to be successful with the FAA, and I see no reason to support it. If we do have a project in mind, if we do know someone who's interested in leasing or buying this property, that's fantastic. Then let's hear who that person is or who that group is. Let's hear what they're going to propose to use it for. Let's hear what we're going to either sell or lease it for. And then we can identify a project at the airport to use that new revenue for. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Do you need authority now to petition the Texas TxDOT, or is all you really need to do now spend a little money on a survey? What's your timeline look like?
Survey and appraisal. So that's that's the first step. So I'm going to be spending money on those things. So
we're talking about a year to 18 months, maybe longer, right?
Yeah. And the last airport manager that I talked to that went through this, it took 24 months.
The motion's actually written to authorize you to petition. But
Right.
is that,
Right.
do you need that now, or do you really only need authority to start a survey? And
Well, yeah, the survey in the appraisal are what I'm going to spend money on. Everything else is just preparing a packet to send to TxDOT. So once we send it to TxDOT, they're going to come back with an environmental assessment. And the way I understand it is at any point we can stop and even reset if we want to. But I don't think that the FAA would allow us to get to a point and then stop and then expect that we could pick back up later if we did identify the lessee.
So we have time to find a lessee.
That's right.
So
Even if the airport is the management company.
in following up on Commissioner Russo, it sounds to me like you really need to have a project before you look for the.
And I've got that. That's honestly, it's real easy for me to get that. The other thing is I have to take into consideration
let me
is.
finish my question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you got to have somebody for a project for that. Okay, which means that, you need to have something to talk about to the Commissioner's Court, saying this is what we're going to petition for, because it would be, to me, disadvantageous to have a project that you knew about that we weren't in agreement with.
Right.
So
let
I
me give
guess-
you a quick example.
I
if it's
guess
okay.
if we pass this, your first step is to what?
First step is to survey and then to get the appraisal.
Survey would say, find some people that are interested in.
No, survey the land.
Oh, physical.
Yeah, physical surveys. Yes, sir.
and price, you mean value survey? Or do you just mean physical survey? It's like, boundary posts kind of.
Exactly.
Okay.
I have to interrupt just for a moment because the agenda item does not indicate that any funds are being requested today. It just said that he would be petitioning for permission. So I don't think that the Commissioner's Court can authorize any spending today for a survey or appraisal, and that would require future Commissioner's Court action.
It almost sounds like what you're asking us is permission to start this process, but you don't actually need us to approve a petition because you're not really ready to file a petition yet anyway. And you'll come back to us later when you know what it will be petitioning for.
Yeah. I mean, I could come back with a detailed list of what project. For example, we just finished a runway rehabilitation, an entire pavement rehabilitation. It's expected to last about 20 years. Logically, pavement is life at an airport. So logically for me, the money would go into a fund that would in 20 or 25 years be used for another pavement rehabilitation.
Would it work for you today if we were only authorizing you to start spending a lot of time and attention on a process that in a few weeks is probably going to cause you to come back to us and ask for, and it sounds like you'll need to come back to us and ask for permission to spend money on the survey as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I think one of your first things need to be to try to find out from them if they might okay it without having projects.
They won't.
They won't.
And if they won't do that, I would kind of agree that.
So when I sent it up
maybe just
there,
part of the property might be
right.
reasonable to.
When I sent it up, I didn't specify who we would be leasing the land to, but I did specify a project, and it was the one that I just gave you for an example that they felt like we were on the right track with.
Well,
but I know they're going to want to know who we're leasing the land to.
And if you're going to lease it to somebody, is this something that needs to go to the public so that we can look for people that are interested in doing that?
Yes, I would assume so.
So it goes out for competitive bids, basically.
Probably. I think that would be up to the Commissioner's Court.
If we were to amend the wording so that instead of authorizing you to petition the TxDOT, we were authorizing you to begin the process of preparing to petition TxDOT, would that jam you up on your schedule,
No,
or is
not
that
at
what you need right now? I move to amend the wording to authorize you to prepare to petition, subject to coming back to us with, more plans about what exactly is going to be in the petition and what you need to spend money on in the early stages, like the survey.
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Does that work okay with the agenda, Council?
I'll second the.
Okay.
Motion made by Commissioner Laubach, seconded by Commissioner Casterline. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Mike, could you, if we approve this, can you get us a Gantt chart? No, maybe not a Gantt chart, but a process chart that shows us what's the next step and everything, because this is pretty complicated and we don't deal
Yeah.
with that very often.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
where you need
absolutely.
commissioners' input, where you don't need commissioners' input
Right.
and everything.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that for you.
Now, can you spend money for this out of the airport fund without commissioners' approval?
No, well, I mean, up to a certain dollar amount, but it would be futile for me to spend money on something that you weren't going to be behind or that I didn't have approval for.
Well, good. I'll call for the question.
Yep.
I still have something I would like to say. I understand that you can come up with projects for which you would use the new revenue stream, but the project of the buyer or the lessee is what I also believe we have to have identified, both for our knowledge, for the community's knowledge, and certainly for the FAA to even consider approval.
You're correct in saying that. I give this a very slim chance of being approved, even at the TxDOT level, if we don't have everything. TxDOT and FAA are in lockstep with respect to aviation in our state.
Right.
And so if we don't have that, it's going to get kicked back.
But for our local purposes, well, I guess we're saying before we would actually move from authorizing to prepare to petition and actually said, okay, we now authorize you to petition, we would be wanting to see, the proposal in some detail, who you'd chosen, which the project would be.
Right.
I don't believe Mike is working on this. I believe that this is something the EDC is working on.
I would
from
rely
the
very heavily
information
on
I've
the
received
EDC,
on
yes, ma'am.
what their strategic plans are, that they're the ones who are recruiting.
I don't know who, if they are recruiting. I just know that I would rely very heavily on the EDC to help bring us.
Correct. It's not something we would generate or that Mike
Right.
is out there sort of looking for someone to come in and.
Right. He's not beating the bushes, but the EDC would be.
Typically in this, in a land release of this scope, that deal's already done. Basically, the entity that wants to lease the land or buy the land is kind of working this top down.
Right.
Yeah. And so in this case, we're just looking for an opportunity to create a new revenue stream for the airport.
Mm-hmm.
Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Cheney.
Aye.
Commissioner Castro.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lava.
Aye.
Judge Miller.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 12.
I move to approve an amendment to order 009/2021, appointing the amended list of election judges for a one-year term to begin September 1st, 2021.
I'll second that.
Motion made and second, Commissioner Cheney. Any discussion?
What's the change?
It is replacing the alternate judge for the GI forum. Hopefully the third time is the charm.
Do we have,
Hopefully. Because we're going to have an election pretty soon.
Yes.
Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Do we have any news on when the possible, I know we have the constitutional amendment election coming, but any news on
the primary
to do redistricting and everything before any of that?
There is some news, and I was actually going to discuss at the end under the department heads, unless you want to discuss it now.
Might as well.
Just go
I'll
now.
go ahead and do it now.
It'll affect timing of
Let
election.
me go grab my other paper. So in the second called special session, Senate Bill 13 was passed that addresses the changes to the primary and primary runoff elections next year in respect to the redistricting. So basically, if the state completes the redistricting by November 15th, the primary would be basically scheduled as is. If the redistricting is completed between the 16th of November and the 28th, the primary would be in early April with the runoff in June. If redistricting is completed December 29th through the 7th of February, the primary would be in May the 24th, and the runoff would be in July. If it is completed after February 7th, then the SOS will set the dates, the Secretary of State's office.
If it's approved after what date did you say?
February 7th.
Wow.
And then also, I did have another thing I want to discuss too. We will be having a countywide election in May of next year. Every county in the state of Texas will be doing one. There's another constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot then. And that it will be going on. It would be a joint election with the cities and schools, so that it's going to help reduce some of the cost for us.
Okay. Any other questions for?
So we need to have our plans for redistricting by November the 16th.
So that bill is just the state to get completed with their stuff, not necessarily the counties to get finished. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castlebrine.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lawbach.
Aye.
Vice Mayor.
Aye, unanimous. Item 13.
I move to approve authorizing engineer John D. Mercer and Associates, or soon to be known as John D. Mercer and Associates, Lynn Engineering, to solicit bids for construction of sewer improvements, including 17 first-time sewer connections in the Dowdy Mathis Colonia pursuant to the Texas Community Block Grant, contract number 7219025.
I second that.
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Russo.
What kind of money are we talking about? And I assume it's fully funded by the grant?
$1 million grant, and it normally it's in kind. The city participates with their impact fees and stuff as the match.
And they do, you normally do
Grants
like
a million, but what we're
inspections
spending.
and
Yes.
supervising the construction and things like that.
What streets are these?
It's on 8th Street. That's the one that it's installed on a lift station and going out to
Oh,
other.
yes. Okay.
So
South end of town at 8th Street and multiple other side streets.
So just to make sure I understand, the grant itself is about $1 million, but what we're talking about spending on engineers is less than that amount and covered completely by the grant, not out of our budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Yes, I have a question on the wording on, Commissioner Castlebrine in the current medical area. Use John D. Mercer and Associates, the budget is above, and in the agenda, the wording was association. I just want to clarify, is that associates or associates?
It's a Scrivener's error, Carrie. It's associates.
If not, roll call.
Commissioner Cheney.
Aye.
Commissioner Castlebrine.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lawbach.
Aye.
Vice Mayor.
Aye, unanimous. Item number 14.
I move to approve the steering committee's recommended projects to be pursued and funded utilizing the American Rescue Plan Act funding, $4.5 million, and to review and I guess I just move that we approve it, and then we will in fact review and discuss other projects that received consideration.
I second that.
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Russo. Discussion.
I need to see a list of those projects again, or what are we approving?
It's on the reverse side of the agenda item for number 14.
Hold on. So could somebody just walk us through there? I mean, there's people at home that aren't seeing any of this, and
Oh, but do you want to read it or do you want me to read it?
well, I'll read it. On the backside of one of the agenda item backup documents is a list of projects totaling 4.3 million. And they include $250,000 for PPE and COVID tests and sanitation products, $1 million worth of record storage management accessibility work, making records accessible to the public for the district clerk's office. Something similar at the same amount, $1 million for the county clerk's office. $100,000 for a potable water storage tank for the jail and a protective barrier for that tank. $70,000 for website development and redesign. I guess that's the county website.
Correct.
$50,000 for 3 portable message trailers to improve public communication. I take it that's the ones you put by the side of the road and they light up. And $1.5 million for infrastructure construction to repair and protect clean water. $90,000 for a generator, an electrical generator for the animal control facilities. $90,000 for the same for the AgriLife Extension Office, and $150,000 in estimated fees for our GrantWorks administrators.
I'd like to give a little further explanation. I'm one of them that I feel people might find confusing is the one that says infrastructure, construction, repair to protect clean water. That includes one of our biggest drainage problems in the county are crossings through state highways. That will include installing a drainage crossing across 35 South at about Bahia Bay and entering a canal through their bulkhead, which will drain water from the watershed that goes from there all the way back to the bypass. Is that accurate, David?
And that engineering work has been done too. That's why we selected that project, because it's ready to go. Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions on the record storage and management for district clerk. Those are things that are included in.
Yeah, they're included.
They're included in that
because it would help people get access. And for instance, in COVID, if people wanted to go online and access records in the clerk's office.
Is that enough money to bring them 100% online with that?
No.
No way.
20%?
No, 50%.
It really just helps them give them remote access from home so they don't have to come into public in a time of pandemic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because everything else seems to be, on boots on the ground type stuff.
So what about the projects that were turned down? What roughly was, what led us to downgrade them?
Okay. The fiber optic loop, or did you want to read those, Bubba?
No, you can. I mean,
the fiber optic loop and last mile. This project is not likely to be approved with this money, but it might qualify under competitive funds. And I know Kim Fouts is looking at that right now. We received requests to help with affordable housing, but we felt no feasible option was presented that was likely to be approved. And we were also looking for projects that would be able to impact the greater number of people. And another item was childcare needs and facility. We need a more clearly defined request. And this also may qualify as FEMA public assistant projects. And that also is available in a separate money fund. Education, we looked at some different projects, but we felt like they were not likely to be approved. Under tourism and nonprofit suggestions, we had been asked to consider billboards, a tourism shuttle bus to help with the art center expansion. And again, we felt like those projects were not likely to be approved. And by approved, I mean, we have to rationalize all of these when we file our reports. Jackie's office files our reports.
And generally funding some kind of COVID hook.
Right.
Not only COVID, but drainage and infrastructure are two of the items that have a pretty general approval on them.
We received requests to impact healthcare. We felt that we had recommended that when we gave money of $250,000 for additional personal protective equipment and for testing kits. And we also had an allocation in our budget for 2022 from the healthcare sales tax fund. So we felt we'd address that. The workforce facility and training. Right now, Del Mar College is working with Kim Fouts, requesting funding via the American Rescue Plan Act, EDA Competitive Good Jobs Challenge Grant. And I think Kim gave us some information about that last time. And then water and wastewater improvements, we received requests and we felt like we addressed that, especially by finding projects that David had that were ready to go. And then fire department equipment and other eligible uses. And that may qualify under the competitive funds that will be released also, I think, through the COG.
So the idea was finding things that fit within the Act's specifications, which are largely COVID related and drainage, and taking into account how far along a project was, how ripe for approval, and whether there were other sources possibly available where we wanted to use this money on, particularly on projects that wouldn't necessarily be easily funded under some other project we have going.
Right. And we did talk with the Grant Works people about eligibility and what they'd seen other counties receive approval and use their money for. And also the Texas Legislative Conference that took place the 1st of September. I attended that virtually, and we had a couple of sessions that talked about this and gave us some great information, examples of what could and could not qualify. And also, I'll mention the Grant Works fees. We will not need to use it. We believe we will not need to use Grant Works administration on all of our projects. Some we have ready to go. We know what we need to do. And so we did not calculate what the total amount was for their fee. And it may come in lower than our estimate.
We have actually submitted a draft contract to them with the total fee of about $75,000.
All right.
We have not heard back from them yet.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Chang.
Aye.
Commissioner Castro.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lawler.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Item 15,
I move to approve the August 2021 Treasurer's Report.
Second.
motion made and seconded, Mr. Castine. Any discussion?
Alma, do you want to tell us anything about it?
Unless you have any questions.
Okay.
Motion, roll call.
Commissioner Chang.
Aye.
Commissioner Castro.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lawler.
Aye.
Chair Snell.
Aye, unanimous. Item 16,
I move to approve the 2022 animal control fee.
I'll second that.
motion made and seconded, Commissioner Cheney. Any discussion?
What are we making changes?
No, ma'am, no change.
Okay.
Roll call.
Commissioner Chang.
Aye.
Commissioner Castro.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Commissioner Lawler.
Aye.
Chair Snell.
Aye, unanimous. Item 17,
I move to approve the adoption of Resolution R 24, 2021 to authorize county staff to issue payment once settlement funds are received from the City of Aransas Pass to David Earl, Special Assistant County Attorney, for services rendered and costs incurred in relation to the State of Texas EXREL Association Against Annexation Abuse versus the City of Aransas Pass, A 190368 CVC in the Aransas County District Court.
Second that motion.
motion made and seconded, Commissioner Cheney. Any discussion?
Do we have an estimated amount?
We have an exact amount. It's in the resolution.
715,000 to Mr. Earl,
Yes, and the remainder to the county.
and the 100,000 that stays in the general fund do you expect to use that to continue the forensic audit of the emails, or do we ever get is that just a dead issue now?
It's a dead issue now since the case settled. We would no longer do discovery in this case. That goes into the general fund. It doesn't have any earmarked use.
And is that,
It does repay some of the costs that we incurred.
so the total's 815,000, and that was, there was like a $750,000 component and the extra 65 for, anyway, this is all of the money that we got. 815,000 is the total fund.
That we will get. So far, we have 100,000.
That we were awarded, right?
Yes. We have the $100,000 that was paid towards the expert that was turned over to us. And that did accrue a small amount of $17.63 of interest. So.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Cheney.
Aye.
Mr. Cashmore.
Aye.
Mr. Russo.
Aye.
Mr. Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye. Item 18.
I move to approve the Texas Association of Counties Worker Compensation Renewal Agreement and Questionnaire for Plan Year 2022 and authorize the county judge to sign it.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Commissioner Cheney.
Are there any changes this year? Are we just renewing on the old terms? Who knows?
No discussion. huh?
Linda?
Yes, no.
Is Linda online?
She's out.
Does anyone have any idea whether we're making any changes this year?
No.
It
There were
appears
no-
there aren't any changes looking at the,
Okay.
my question, and I did send an email to Linda last week and asked if she could bring in the last 2 years of rates. And this year, she said, we haven't received the renewal year's rates, but I haven't received the last 2 years, but hopefully I'll get those. But one of the attachments where you have to fill in the questionnaires, it says if you have any watercraft over 26 feet in length, please fill out this form. And we do have watercraft, but it's under 26 feet. And I wonder about not submitting that in the future, since it is under the regulation amount.
As Sheriff Mills had
I believe they're over 26. I'll verify that.
Okay, because this shows that it's 22 feet. So if it's over 26, then that's good. We're filling this out, but then we need to correct its length.
Yeah, this does show 22.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney.
Aye.
Commissioner Cashmore.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Mr. Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
18.
I move to approve budget line item transfers and amendments. If there are any.
We have none at this time.
Motion made and seconded. Commissioner Cashfly. Roll call.
Mr. Cheney.
Aye.
Mr. Cashmore.
Aye.
Mr. Russo.
Aye.
Mr. Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye.
I move to approve accounts payable and payroll liability.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Commissioner Cheney. Any discussion?
Yes, sir. I would like to let you know on the resolution that you just passed for Mr. Earl, we will be including this $100,017.63 in the accounts payable that we send out. The resolution does authorize us to pay him that now rather than waiting until December. Also, on the list of invoices that you have, we have about almost 1.2 million with capital improvements for the projects for FEMA and all of our grants, which are all reimbursable. So those will be submitted for reimbursement once we get canceled checks back.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Reimbursable by FEMA.
Some of them are FEMA, some of them are TDM, some of them are GLO. It's just all of our different grants.
What is the turnaround time on those?
GLO is pretty quick. I mean, it basically we have to wait for our bank statements to get back. And then once we submit them, GLO's sending them back pretty quick within a couple of weeks. FEMA takes a little bit longer. But
thank you.
Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney.
Aye.
Commissioner Cashmore.
Aye.
Mr. Russo.
Aye.
Mr. Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. All right, we're at the point where elected officials or department heads have anything to bring up. Now's the time.
I wanted to, I was unable to attend the employment recognition luncheon. I was working out of town and could not get back. I want to tell the employees I really appreciate them. I think we probably have the best group of employees, either for county or just all the way around with knowledge and everything. I noticed they resurfaced my streets in my subdivision the last few days. And I'm continued to be amazed at how quickly and how efficiently the road and bridge are able to do that. And I just mentioned road and bridge because it just comes to my mind. But they always look good. They do good work, and they are never a bother to the community. They get in, get out, and I appreciate that.
We all do. Road and Bridge does a good job, right?
They really do. Thanks sea level rise.
Any other announcements? If not, do I have a?
I move to adjourn.
I second that
Okay,
motion.
seconded, Mr. Russo, unanimous.